No U.S. sanctions against Russia hitting their banks, government, and elite Russians, and more could be on the way. A full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine is imminent, according to Ukrainian, American, and Western officials. Isabel Rosales reports on the design behind these sanctions to deter Russia in her top story at 5:30.
Tough new sanctions to pressure Russia to back down from its advances on Ukraine.
It's a very broad-ranging set of sanctions, deeper than anything we've seen before.
The sanctions, punishment for what President Joe Biden calls the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
When all is said and done, we're going to judge Russia by its actions, not its words.
For the first time, the U.S. fully sanctioning two Russian financial institutions. Russia barred from raising money from the West.
These costs are going to escalate from here.
The U.S. taking it further to cripple the flow of money to President Vladimir Putin by going after members of his inner circle and their families.
We put on notice the oligarchy in Russia that no one is safe.
World leaders actively assessing whether these sanctions will indeed deter Putin.
I think we should still try to deter, but we also should not assume it will work.
The country already paying a hefty price. This week alone, more than $25 billion has been wiped off the value of Russian stocks. And the Russian ruble has fallen to near record lows against the dollar.
Hit Russia's economy now and hit it hard.
The West reserving some of its toughest sanctions should Russia proceed to a full-scale invasion. The so-called nuclear option would remove Russia from a key global transaction ledger, making it difficult for banks to send money in or out of the country.
Russia's already feeling the pain.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales.
All right, Isabel, thank you. So we want to break down how what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine border there could actually impact us here in the U.S. And joining us now in studio, we have Dr. Robert Farley with UK's Patterson School of Diplomacy and also International Commerce. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.
It's an honor to be here.
All right, let's dig right into it. The Western democracies, they've made it really clear here at this point that the military force is not an option. They've opted for sanctions instead, at least right now. How effective are those sanctions in your opinion?
Well, we don't know yet. We don't know what Russia is going to do in the next few days. So there is a hope that the threat of sanctions, and we've already had sanctions from Germany and from the United Kingdom and the sanctions from the United States, there is the hope that those sanctions communicate to Russia how serious the West is and that it will cause Vladimir Putin to rethink his plan to invade Ukraine. And so if we deter Russia from attacking, then they have been effective.
Okay. Do you think they work in general?
I don't think that they work in the sense, I don't think they are going to deter Russia from doing what it wants to do right now.
Okay.
I think they may work to punish Russia in the long term, though.
Interesting. Let's get into the pipeline now. We've been seeing a lot of reports on this, the loss of a European pipeline. What does that mean, especially for us over here in the U.S.?
Well, the United States doesn't import any natural gas from Russia. It will increase the price of energy around the world, and so that'll impact the United States a little bit. In the long run, if Germany has to replace its natural gas from somewhere that's not Russia, then that probably benefits the United States and it probably benefits U.S. allies. In the short run, though, it's going to cause energy disruptions and it's going to cause energy prices to increase in the United States and around the world.
We've been sort of talking about that with the gas prices. When people are filling up at the pump right now, we're already starting to see it. So in your opinion, this is only going to get worse or become a bigger problem?
Right. The only thing that Russia really exports is energy. It exports oil and it exports natural gas. And so any sanctions against Russia are going to attack its energy exports, and that, of course, raises prices around the world.
Okay. There's talk of Putin trying to recreate the USSR. In your opinion, do you think that's what's happening right now?
I think it's less about the USSR than about the Russian Empire, right? The Russian Empire that existed before 1917. He's talking in very nationalistic statements and evoking a Russian nationalist history that suggests that Ukraine is not a country that's real. It's not a country that exists at all, and Ukrainians as a people don't exist. And so that suggests that he's certainly interested in taking over parts, at least, of where Ukraine is right now.
Okay. Out of all the places in Eastern Europe that were formerly part of Russia, why do you think Russia is really going back to Ukraine at this point?
Ukraine is culturally critically important to Russia. Kiev is the cradle of Russian civilization, and for Russian nationalists, this is very, very religiously important to them. And Ukraine is not a member of NATO. The Baltic republics are members of NATO, and Poland is a member of NATO. They're protected. Their security is guaranteed, but Ukraine's is not.
From your perspective, I think a lot of folks are thinking about, okay, you know, this isn't really here happening in my backyard. How is this really going to impact me? Is there anything in particular or maybe advice that you want to share to the average American out there who's watching and saying, is there something I should be looking for down the line or coming from all of this? What should I be paying attention to?
Well, in the short run, anybody who's watching this, if you know anyone in Ukraine, if you have friends in Ukraine, travelers, ask them to leave, because I think it's going to grow very dangerous. In the long term, I think it's a safer world for Americans and for everyone else if countries like Russia are not allowed to eat their neighbors. That's been a norm that we've had for 75 years, and it's a norm worth upholding.
Any final thoughts tonight?
I very much hope and I pray that the people in Ukraine and in Russia remain safe.
All right, Dr. Farley, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to talk to us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.